Two young cops stopped an elderly black woman on her way home. Get up if you're really paralyzed. She was 76. Paralyzed. They shoved her wheelchair into a street lamp. No one helped. Just one trembling teen recorded it all. And when the footage went viral, no one knew. She was the mother of Brookmere's mayor. From one act of brutality, a nation rose in outrage. The city of Brookmere simmered under the late summer sun, a sprawling patchwork of gentrified neighborhoods and forgotten districts. It was a place where old wounds festered behind glass towers and broken sidewalks. On the south side, among aging tenements and rust-covered fences, Clara Hayes wheeled herself slowly down Walton Avenue, her path familiar and well-worn. Clara was 76 years old, a former elementary school teacher. She had once led generations of children through books and music. But a bus accident a decade ago had paralyzed her from the waist down. Since then, she had lived quietly in the same building she'd grown up in, watching the city around her change, but never truly heal. That day, she had just left the corner market, a cloth grocery bag resting on her lap. Inside, 2 apples, a can of black beans, and a small carton of milk. Enough to get by. She greeted the people she passed, a nod here, a wave there, and continued her slow journey toward the apartment complex that had long since lost its elevator. As she turned the corner onto Myrtle Street, 2 police officers leaned casually against their cruiser, parked half on the sidewalk. Clara paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. She had seen enough in her years to read body language like a book. These men, young, white, arrogant, radiated danger. The taller one, Officer Brantley, pushed off the car and nudged his partner, Officer Ellis. Clara's hands tightened slightly on her wheels. "Hey you," Brantley called out. "Stop right there." Clara stopped. She kept her voice even. "Can I help you, officers?" Ellis approached, eyes flicking down to her chair. "Where you headed?" "Home," Clara replied. "Just picked up a few things." Brantley circled around behind her, his voice laced with suspicion. "This your neighborhood?" Clara met his gaze. "I've lived here over 60 years. Ellis chuckled. "Sure you have. And I bet you've been milking that chair for just as long." Clara blinked. "Excuse me." "You heard him," Brantley said. "People fake disabilities all the time to avoid work, get sympathy. Maybe you're one of them." "I'm not," Clara said softly but firmly. "I don't appreciate that accusation." Ellis stepped closer, towering over her. "Then stand up. Let's see if you're really crippled." Clara felt her pulse quicken. She tried to turn her chair away, but Brantley grabbed the handles, locking her in place. The grocery bag toppled, the apples rolling onto the pavement. "Hey," she snapped. "Leave me alone." Ellis smirked. "You raising your voice at an officer?" Brantley shoved the wheelchair forward. Clara gasped as the jolt nearly tipped her over. A few people across the street paused, watching. "What's the matter?" Ellis taunted. "Don't want to show us your miracle recovery?" "I'm paralyzed," Clara said through gritted teeth. "I told you." Brantley leaned in. "You think we care who you are? We don't. But someone might." That comment chilled Clara. Someone might. Did they know who her son was? Julian Hayes, mayor of Brookmere, had always urged her to keep a low profile. He was trying to change the city from within, and exposing her to danger was his one fear. But here it was, happening. Brantley grabbed her wrist. "You're under arrest. Disorderly conduct." "For what?" Clara cried, resisting and lying to officers. Ellis pulled out zip ties instead of cuffs. "Let's make it nice and easy, Grandma." As Brantley yanked her arms behind her, Clara cried out in pain. "I'm 76, she shouted. "And I've done nothing." A teenager across the street had begun filming. "Yo, what the hell are they doing to her?" His voice cracked. "Put the phone away." Ellis barked. But it was too late. The video would hit the internet within minutes, and the storm would begin. The holding cell smelled like metal and bleach. Clara Hayes sat hunched on the cold bench, her hands trembling slightly from the zip ties that had only just been removed. Her wrists were raw, her back aching from the rough handling. But it wasn't the pain that rattled her, it was the shame. Not for what she had done, for what had been done to her. Through the iron bars of the precinct's holding area, she could hear the faint buzz of chatter, the clicking of boots, and the low hum of voices. But no one came to speak to her. No lawyer, no doctor, just silence. Just the knowledge that, once again, her blackness had defined her before her humanity could even speak. The officers hadn't seen Clara the woman. They hadn't seen the teacher who had read Charlotte's Web to classrooms full of second graders, or the mother who had raised the mayor of Brookmere on a shoestring budget, patching clothes and hope with the same steady hands. No, they had seen a black woman in a wheelchair. And to them, that meant trouble. Across the city, in the upper floors of City Hall, Mayor Julian Hayes stood frozen in his office, the glow from the tablet in his hand casting a sharp light across his face. The video was only 42 seconds long, but it felt eternal. His mother, shoved, berated, manhandled. He'd seen police brutality on screen before. He'd marched, he'd signed legislation. But this was his mother. Clara. His voice was low and flat. Where is she? Naomi Cruz, his chief of staff, stood stiffly by the door. They have her at the 9th precinct. No formal charges yet. The arrest report says suspicion of disorderly conduct. Suspicion? Julian's voice cracked like a whip. Of what? Grocery shopping while black. Naomi swallowed hard. We're sending legal now. The precinct's stonewalling us. They haven't even let a lawyer see her. Julian's jaw tightened. Get the attorney general on the phone. And the police commissioner. I want everyone who touched her name. But sir, I said now. Back at the precinct, Clara shifted, her eyes drifting to the small barred window near the ceiling. Gray light filtered through. The hours were dragging. There was no clock, no water, no wheelchair cushion. Just a slab of steel and the weight of being forgotten. She didn't cry. Not yet. But she felt the heat of it behind her eyes. And then, something shifted. A young black officer appeared in front of the cell. He looked barely 30, his uniform stiff with newness. His name tag read. He stared at her for a moment. Then, he unlocked the door and stepped in. Ms. Hayes, he said softly. She blinked. You know who I am? He nodded. We all do. Ma'am, I didn't know they brought you in. Clara's voice was hoarse. They didn't see me, Officer Reed. They saw someone they could hurt without consequence. Reed lowered his eyes. She continued. They didn't ask for my ID. They didn't care I couldn't stand. One of them said I was faking it for benefits. They called me Grandma like I was a joke. Reed said nothing. You have black skin, Officer Reed. What do you think they'll do when it's your mother next time? That struck him. He looked her in the eye, and for a moment, the badge on his chest looked heavier than his body could carry. I'm sorry, he said. I'm going to make sure the mayor knows. I already know. The voice came from the doorway. Julian Hayes stood there in a dark gray suit, eyes burning with restrained fury. His security team flanked him, but it was the raw pain in his face that made Officer Reed step aside. Clara looked up. Julian. He crossed the room, falling to one knee beside her. Mom, he whispered. I'm so sorry. She touched his cheek. I told you this city wouldn't change overnight. No, he said, voice shaking. But it shouldn't be allowed to do this to you. Naomi Cruz entered behind him, speaking quickly. Legal team's here. We're getting her out now. But sir, the press got the video. It's gone viral. Julian turned to Reed. Get me the names of the arresting officers. Reed nodded. Brantley and Ellis. Julian stood. They're done. By nightfall, the hashtags had already started. Hashtag Justice for Clara. Hashtag they didn't TC her. Hashtag Black and Disabled. News anchors dissected the footage frame by frame. Activists called for firings and indictments. Politicians scrambled to release statements. Civil rights groups arrived at the precinct. Protesters gathered with signs and chants. Clara sat quietly in the back of Julian's SUV, wrapped in a blanket, watching the chaos unfold around her. They didn't just attack me, she said. They attacked every woman who looks like me, who moves like me. Julian looked over. And they're about to see what happens when we fight back. The city of Brookmere hadn't seen protests this large in over a decade. Thousands flooded the streets outside the 9th precinct, waving hand-painted signs that read Black and Disabled Lives Matter and Justice for Clara Hayes. The chants echoed through the high rises, loud enough to shake glass in certainty. But in a penthouse office downtown, far from the noise, a man watched the chaos unfold with cool detachment. He sat behind a steel desk in a darkened room, his face half obscured by shadows. On the wall behind him, a blueprint of the city hung framed, its neighborhoods outlined like a battlefield. His name was Victor Sloan, though few outside a select circle knew it. To most who encountered his influence, he was simply called the architect. She wasn't supposed to matter, he murmured, his voice like gravel. Just an old woman in a chair. A figure across from him shifted uneasily. Deputy Chief Alan Merton, his uniform crisp, but his expression tight, replied, "We didn't know she was the mayor's mother." "That's your job. To know." Merton swallowed. "We're managing the fallout. The union's already putting together a narrative. Brantley and Ellis were acting on a credible tip." The architect turned, eyes glinting. "Do you know what happens when you build a city on rotted beams, Alan?" Merton hesitated. "It collapses." "Exactly. And Julian Hayes just found the first crack." Back at City Hall, Julian sat at a long oak table surrounded by his legal team, community leaders, and civil rights attorneys. Naomi Cruz stood at the projector, clicking through photos and documents. "We have 3 confirmed excessive force complaints against Brantley," she said. 2 for Ellis. All buried. All dismissed internally. Julian leaned forward. "And who signed off on those dismissals?" Naomi paused, then clicked. A name appeared. Deputy Chief Alan Merton. Julian sat back slowly. "So this goes deeper than bad apples." "It's a whole poisoned orchard," said Maya Knox, an attorney from the Brookmere Civil Liberties Union. "And someone's been pruning the evidence." Julian turned to Naomi. "Give me everything we have on Merton. His connections, his donations, his appointments." "Already started, sir. And one more thing, we found something strange." "Body cam footage from the arrest?" "It's gone. Wiped. No logs of it ever existing." A long silence. Julian spoke at last. "They're scared. That means we're close." In the secure wing of Mercy General, Clara Hayes lay propped up in bed. Her body was still sore, but her mind was sharper than ever. A nurse adjusted her 4-line while Clara read aloud from a folder Julian had left her. "The architect," she read. "Victor Sloan. Developer. Consultant. Former advisor to the police union." The nurse raised an eyebrow. "Sounds important." "Sounds dangerous," Clara muttered. "And he's the one who built the precinct funding model that hides misconduct payouts." She closed the folder and looked out the window. Protesters were still outside, their voices distant but unwavering. "Brookmere's finally listening," she whispered. "But are they ready to act?" Later that night, Naomi met with a whistleblower, a data analyst named Sean who worked in the police department's internal systems. In a dim parking garage, Sean handed her a flash drive. "Everything's on here," he said. "Merton, Sloan, the cover-ups, and more. There's a slush fund. They're paying off victims to stay quiet, even burying homicide files." Naomi took the drive, her heart racing. "Why are you doing this?" Sean hesitated. "Because my sister was one of them." Nobody listened. At sunrise, Julian stood before the city in a press conference. Clara watched from her hospital room, the TV volume turned high. "This is not a moment," Julian said into the microphones. "It's a reckoning. For years, corruption has hidden in plain sight, behind uniforms, badges, and campaign donations. But Brookmere deserves better. We are launching an independent investigation into police misconduct, and we will hold those in power accountable." The crowd erupted in applause. Reporters fired questions. Hashtags trended within minutes. Back in his penthouse, the architect poured himself a glass of scotch and stared at the map. "You want a war, Mayor Hayes," he said to no one. "Then let's redraw the city in blood." And the next phase began. The storm that had raged through Brookmere for weeks began to settle. Protests still gathered outside city buildings, but their chants had taken on a new tone, not just of outrage, but of purpose. Clara Hayes, still healing in the hospital, watched it all with cautious hope. One morning, Julian walked into her room carrying 2 cups of tea. She smiled. "From Franklin's?" she asked. "Nowhere else," he said, handing her one. "They added ginger, just how you like it." They sat in a quiet moment. For the first time in days, Julian looked rested. "They've started reviewing the use of force reports," he said. "Publicly. Every single one for the past 10 years. Clara raised an eyebrow. "Transparency. Imagine that." Julian nodded. Naomi and the legal team compiled a full case on Deputy Chief Merton. "He's resigning today." "And the architect." "Victor Sloan." Julian smiled faintly. "The feds took him in this morning. Money laundering, obstruction, racketeering. Turns out he couldn't cover his tracks forever." Clara took a sip of tea, then set it down. "What about the officers?" "Brantley and Ellis?" "Fired. Under investigation for civil rights violations. The city is settling with you, but more importantly, we're pushing for state-level reform. Body cameras. Civilian oversight. A new training protocol." Clara nodded slowly. "Julian, you've done something real." "We did, Mom. You standing tall, even sitting down, did more than my speeches ever could. Across Brookmere, murals of Clara Hayes began appearing. On brick walls, painted fences, even alleyways, her silhouette in a wheelchair became a symbol of resilience. Underneath each image, one phrase was scrawled in bold. They saw my skin, but now they hear my voice. Community centers saw a rise in volunteer numbers. Public hearings were filled with first-time speakers. For the first time in years, trust, though fragile, was beginning to grow. Julian attended a town hall in the East Side. A young girl, no older than 10, raised her hand and asked, "Can someone like me be mayor one day?" Julian smiled. "You already are the kind of person who can lead. And now, we're building a city that will let you." The room erupted in applause. That night, Julian and Clara returned to the apartment where she had lived her whole life. The elevator had finally been repaired. The neighbors greeted her like royalty. As they sat on her small balcony, watching the city lights flicker, Clara whispered, "I was so scared that night. Not of the men, but that no one would care." Julian took her hand. "They care now. Because of you." She smiled. "Then maybe, just maybe, we can heal." And for the first time in a long while, Brookmere felt quiet. Not silenced, but peaceful. 1 month after Clara Hayes was released, Brookmere entered a season of healing. The proposed reforms passed by a wide margin in the city council. Police officers began retraining under new protocols, and an independent civilian oversight committee was formally established. Local news called it the Clara era. Clara didn't care for the name. "I'm not a legend," she told Julian one afternoon. "I'm just a survivor." Julian smiled. "And that's exactly what makes you legendary." At the newly opened cultural center in East Brookmere, hundreds gathered for a naming ceremony. Clara sat up front, on stage with Julian, Naomi, and several community leaders. The event host stepped up to the podium. "We are honored to announce the official name of this center as the Clara Hayes Community Center." Thunderous applause followed. Clara raised a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. Then she lowered it, smiled, and rolled her wheelchair to the microphone. "There was a time," she said, "when I believed my voice wasn't worth hearing. But I was wrong. Not because I shouted louder, because this time, you listened." She looked over the crowd, her eyes bright. "If I leave you with anything, let it be this: never stay silent in the face of wrong. Let your voice be the flame that lights someone else's way." That night, Julian sat alone in his office. A small box rested on his desk. Inside was Brantley's old police badge, now decommissioned. On top lay a handwritten note. Justice came late, but it came. Julian looked up as Naomi entered. "Good news," she said. "We just secured federal funding to expand the oversight program statewide. And the architect, Victor Sloan, pled guilty. He won't be walking free again." Julian nodded. "Good. But there's still so much left to do." Naomi smiled. "Then let's get started. Right here. In Brookmere, where everything changed." That same night, Clara returned to the old church on Mason Street, the place where she used to sing as a girl. As the choir began, she closed her eyes and felt the music wash over her. Each note was like balm to her wounds, and to the wounds of the city. After the service, a young black boy, no older than 8, approached her shyly. "Miss Clara," he said softly, "can I grow up to be like you?" Clara placed a hand on his shoulder. "No, baby. You'll grow up to go even farther." Brookmere was far from perfect, but it was trying. And for Clara Hayes, that was enough to believe that the light could always return.